Well, we're here today with a good friend, an old friend of the Brandenburg Museum, Frank Christian. Frank, welcome to Cinnabar Hills, and as you know, the Brandenburg Golf Museum very well, so welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Your history of golf is just absolutely amazing. We don't have enough time to put it on film, but we're going to try to put a little bit of it on film, okay? So tell the world your career. Give us a little bit about your biography, your history, your father that taught you probably most everything that you learned. But
Well, it all started for me when I was 6 years old. My father was the club photographer at the Augusta National from the very beginning. And he had met Bobby Jones when Bob was playing in Augusta prior to his Grand Slam year of 1930. And when they formed the Augusta National, they asked my father to be the club photographer, which he readily accepted. There was no pay involved, but it was a great honor. So he took me out there. My father took me out to meet Bob Jones when I was 6 years old, and Bob gave me my first golf club and my first lesson how to hold the club and how to swing it. So that's where it began with me.
that's amazing. The world famous great amateur Bobby Jones
Got me started.
got you started. Yeah, keep going, please. Tell me a little bit.
So then my first foray into professional photography when I was 13 years old, 1948. I made my first photographs at the Augusta National that were published. And then I began shooting with my father up until 1954, he had a massive heart attack and had to retire. So I took over from him then, and right on through 1955. And after that, I went into the Air Force for 4 years and then came back and continued my work at the Augusta National. And I retired in 2000.
So you grew up in Augusta,
Oh, yes.
Georgia. Yeah, a hometown boy, as they
That's
said.
it.
Huh? Was there much pressure on you when you did take over for your father? Augusta wasn't the Augusta that we know now, because the Masters has made it so huge that, and that was before television, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was. Well, no, it was never a rushed place to work. Everybody was relaxed. They knew what they were doing and how to do it. So, it's one of the only major that's played at the same venue every year.
Yes.
And the people who they have as head of their different job descriptions, they know they've been doing it for some of them for 50 years, so they know how to do it, and they do it very relaxed manner.
Sure.
There's no rushing around, and you know what you have to do, and you do it.
And you were pretty relaxed because you basically grew up on the golf course. When you were younger, you got to play around the area and stuff.
Well, as a matter of fact, John, I lived about a little over, I guess, a mile from the course where I grew up. And during the summers, when the club was closed, my brother and I used to go down and walk down to the Augusta National and onto the grounds and go swimming in Ray's Creek. We'd use number 12 as a launching pad, jump off the green at number 12 into the creek there and swim.
That's amazing,
And during the war years, it was closed 43, 44, and 45, so we were out there all the time, and they were raising cows on the property, cows and turkeys, and all of the turkeys were in bins. The turkeys were roaming around all over the course, so we chase the cows and have fun playing all over the course.
And if I remember history correctly, Augusta National at that time, I won't say suffered, but was really slow, membership-wise and stuff. It wasn't the Augusta National that we know so much now.
No, it grew. I think the real popularity of the Masters tournament and of the Augusta National was when Arnold Palmer came on the scene, and it was televised. That really did popularize the Masters tournament.
He was a charmer, no question about it, wasn't he?
Oh, he was great. Everybody loved Arnold.
Yeah. And it says in your book that you felt, and that's where Arnie's Army actually started.
Oh, it did start in Augusta.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And you became, through the years, a friend of Arnold's?
He was a dear friend. And my wife and I used to go to dinner with him quite often, he and his wife, and got to know him, a really good friend.
That's one of the things that really fascinates me. I've known you for roughly 25 years now through Lee Brandenburg, who we'll talk about soon. But it fascinates me, the history of golf and the people that you got to photograph and become friends with. You know, Gene Sarazen, Sam Snead, Jack Nicklaus, Ben Hogan, Walter Hagen.
Byron Nelson, don't leave him out. He's the greatest.
It's hard to stop. You know, Tom Watson, you can go on for a long time. And and now looking back and you know, you're 89 years old in unbelievable shape for 89, headed to 90. But
turned 90 this year. This fall I turned 90.
Well, you look great for 90. I hope that I can make it that long and look as good as you do.
I hope you can too.
Have all those experiences with those guys, and to walk along and say, hi, Arnie, or hi, Gene, or whatever, that's just, it's charming.
It's so much fun, and a lot of this stuff just happens by accident. I'll give you, for instance, there's a real iconic photograph that I made of Arnold with this red Cadillac convertible.
Yeah, we have it in the museum.
I was coming out of the front of the clubhouse. I had to go somewhere to do a photograph, and as I went out the front door of the clubhouse, there was this beautiful red Cadillac convertible, and Arnold was looking over it. And I walked up to him and I said, hi, Arnold, is this yours? He said, oh, I wish it was. And we had this conversation, and he said, you want to get in it? And we're talking. And then all of a sudden this voice says, Frank, do you mind? We're in the middle of shooting a commercial. I said, oh my God. But yeah. So I said, well, let me get a photograph of Arnold before you run me off. So I made Arnold leaning against the Cadillac. And that's been published in a lot of magazines all over the world. And it's part of my book as well. And just by accident.
It's part of the museum. You know, we have that picture in the museum. And when people ask me, as a curator of the museum, I say, well, you know, that was a commercial that Arnold was doing. I didn't realize that it was a commercial, but your picture was separate from the commercial.
Oh, so, absolutely. Yeah.
So now I've got a little bit more information on that, and you'll teach me a lot just in this conversation today. So as you went on then, you know, your photography led you to a lot of golf, not only just the Masters and Augusta. You know, you did stuff for the Ryder Cup, the PGA of America. You did stuff for individual tournaments, celebrity tournaments, people you got to know. As I talk about golf professionals, Sarah's and Demira, you talk about celebrities that you encountered through your whole career, you know, and places you've gone.
Well, I think a lot of that was from my association with Frank Sinatra. I did his tournament for a number of years, and it was through the Augusta National that I met most of these people.
I'm sure.
And I did the PGA of America's work for 38 years. And that included the PGA Championship and the Ryder Cup and all of the other events that they held. I did the Wilson Sporting Goods, the Wilson Classic, the FootJoy Tournament up in Brockton, Massachusetts for a number of years. And it took us all over the world, really, shooting golf tournaments.
Yeah, I was, my background is in the golf industry, and I've always felt that I was in the golf industry at the right time, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But when you start talking about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, that's really the time of golf. That's when Walter Hagen, Mr. Charming, came into the golf industry and had his own flair. And I assumed that you had bumped into Walter Hagen.
Oh, I did. I met Walt Hagen. Bobby Locke, 48.
South Africa.
Phenomenon, yes. Yeah. He was great golf. I watched him. Yes, some of the Wild Bill Melhorn.
Oh, I know the name.
Yeah.
I don't know stories about him. I do know the name, yeah.
Johnny Revolta, all those guys from years and years ago who played in the 30s and 40s, I got to know and followed their careers until they were retired and sadly finally passed on.
Well, one of my good friends is Johnny Pop.
Oh, yeah.
Johnny lives here in Northern California, just lives up in Santa Rosa now.
Yeah.
Johnny's 80, your age, 88, 89 years old, from Louisiana, and has this southern drawl to him, similar to yours, I'd say, okay? And a charming guy.
Nice guy, yes.
And he brought up a point to me one day. We were having lunch my last name is Shiro, but he used his accent. Shiro, he says, when I was playing golf, he says, we didn't make much money. He said, but we had a great time. And had dinner, or we had lunch yesterday, and you were talking about the income of that era.
Right. If they didn't come in the top 5, they had no money.
Yeah.
And they were playing. Ben Hogan had told me that so much depended on winning a tournament. You only made a few $100 in those days, and they had the expenses, and a lot of them would travel together. Whoever had a car, they would all pile in and make it to the next venue. And as a matter of fact, a lot of them talked about one guy would go in and rent a hotel room, and the rest of them would come in and spend the night on the floor. And sometimes, if they didn't have enough money to pay the hotel bill, they would have a rope. They would tie it to the radiator and come out the window and leave.
Definitely the 50s.
And Ben Hogan said, "Make sure when you buy the rope that it's porgy proof." That's Porgy Oliver. It's kind of heavy set. They had to get a rope that was
he was a big
strong
boy.
enough.
He was a big boy. Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, that's what's so great about history, and that brings us to Lee. Lee Brandenburg had a huge passion for golf, had a huge passion for history, and I look at you and talk to you and say, Frank Christian has a huge passion for golf, has a huge passion for history. So the two of you kind of meshed together. So tell me a little bit about when you first met Lee, who has developed this wonderful museum of ours.
Yeah.
Give me an idea of when you bumped into Lee first.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I met Lee in 1968. Lee had come to the Masters with Gay Brewer, and it was a year after Gay Brewer had won the tournament. And Gay and I have been friends for a long time, and he and my brother Paul had gone fishing and caught a lot of fish, and they're having a fish fry. So he called and said, "Hey, come on over and have some fish with us tonight. I want you to meet some of my friends from California." And that happened to be Lee and I in Brandenburg. So that's where we met. But I didn't really get close to Lee until 1983. My wife Jackie and I decided to drive across the United States to see some of the country instead of fly. And so we drove a little car across the United States and went to, I think it was Riviera. They were holding the PGA Championship then at Riviera. And Lee came down and we had a good time together. And he said, "You've got to come up to Pebble Beach and visit me." So he's very convincing. So we decided to drive from Riviera, LA up to, and spent like 4 or 5 days with Lee. And that's when we first got together. And his love of golf and also golf history was amazing. And we talked golf and golf memorabilia, and he had collected a lot of mementos from the Bing Crosby, who later came with AT&T at Pebble, and he showed me some of his stuff. And so then when he came back to the Masters, I think the following year and subsequent years, he came down to my office and saw really my collection of stuff.
And he was in heaven.
Yeah.
When he saw your stuff,
well, a lot of it is here today in his
museum. We have it over here. We'll get into that for sure. But he was in heaven. I'll guarantee you that. Yeah. So, that's how I met you, through Lee. But I could see the two of you. There's an old cliche about brothers with different mothers and stuff. And the two of you were so much alike in so many ways. You could tell a pretty good story. I don't know that you could sing very well, but you guys both tried. That's for sure. But you traveled. You ended up traveling. You became such good friends and family friends. You ended up traveling almost the world.
We did. Lee and I together. He was working on a film script, and we traveled all over the South, Florida, Mississippi. We went to Elvis Presley's boyhood home, and traveled all over the United States together. And with our wives, we traveled through Europe, Italy, Italy for a number of weeks. We traveled through France, through England, Ireland. Yeah, we made a lot of trips together.
I could see you and Jackie and Diane doing all the cultural things. I can see Lee just looking around for golf courses and property and
Oh, it was impossible. We'd be traveling through like Italy and places that Diane and Jackie and I wanted to go, and Lee would say, "No, no, 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 we got to go see this golf course. We got to see this golf course." Well, we saw so many golf courses on our travels.
Yeah, culture,
Got tired
culture
of looking
wasn't
at
his
golf
strength.
courses.
Okay. I might jump into here a little bit. Lee passed away now about 8 years ago, okay? And every time I'm in this museum, Lee sits right here on my right
Yeah,
shoulder.
of course.
So every time I say something wrong, Lee's telling me that. And so when I'm saying Lee wasn't culturist, he's saying, no, 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 John, I was culturist. But we know that his culture was golf for Lee and history. He loved, he loved fire, he loved military. But the two of you together, you could sit with you guys for days.
Yeah.
And,
Well, let me tell you a little bit about Lee's association with Augusta National. Lee, when he finished college at San Jose, he went back into the Army as a young officer, and he was stationed at Fort Gordon. And he had read in the newspaper that President Eisenhower was going to be playing at the Augusta National. So, Lee said, "I got to go see the president." So he and another friend, a fellow officer, drove over to Burton Road, and they couldn't get in the front gate, obviously. With the president there, a lot of security. But he did find a little drive, a little dirt road that went to the house that stood at the right in back of the second tee at the Augusta National.
the first
he
green,
found their
second
driveway, a little dirt road, and it led right into the course. And they parked the car and got out, and they saw the president coming up. And all of a sudden, the Secret Service came up and said, "How did you guys get here?" "Well, we just came in this drive up there." "Well, don't move. Stay right here, and don't move." So they stood there, and General Light finished his putting out on number one, and he came over and he saw these young officers standing there, and he came over and he started talking to Lee and his buddy. And of course, that's Eisenhower's personality. He just included everybody.
Yeah.
And that was Lee's introduction to the Augusta National and the Masters.
Yeah, Lee personally told me that story once, and he said, because he was president-elect at the time, he was general and president-elect, and President-elect Eisenhower walked over and saluted him, and he saluted him back, and he said he couldn't walk by an officer, and I wasn't going to not say anything. And then the Secret Service said, "You guys get the heck out of here now."
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, Lee was really kind of proud of that. And Lee Brandenburg never believed in a no trespassing sign.
No, that was his signature personality, that he liked to sneak into places. I know that here at Pebble Beach, when they have the Concours d'Elegance or whatever,
That's it. You got it.
Lee delighted in telling me how he got in there, snuck in through the back door and made his way out and walked down, and he saw Arnold Schwarzenegger. They say, "Hey, Arnold, come on, have some
Come on to the
champagne."
house. Yeah.
He told the fellow, "Bring me a few bottles of champagne." He had no credentials or whatever, and he was right there. But Lee did that everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere we went, he wanted to sneak in some places.
Yeah, Roger Maltby tells the story. I won't go into the whole details, but he was working for NBC, and he had forgot his credentials. He had to go back to the hotel and get them because they wouldn't let him in, even though, they knew who he was and stuff. So he goes back, he comes back, he walks into the hotel, and who's standing in the middle of the lobby but Lee Brandenburg with no credentials at all. So that was the way Lee was. So the two of you who collaborated on, almost the whole museum, really. There's 70% of the items in the museum, he either bought them from you, you either bought them for him, or he asked you about them. I mean, and so I'd like to talk about some of those.
Sure.
Okay. One of them is a special book, is the Bobby Jones Down the Fairway book. It's inscribed with Bobby Jones and O.B. Keeler.
O.B. Keeler, and also the director of the Bobby Jones series, How I Play Golf, he did with Warner Brothers.
That was Charlie.
And someone offered the book to me, and I was so excited when I got it. And I called Lee and I says, "Boy, what a find I have here." And, Lee, "Oh, no, it needs to be in my museum." This is.
Yeah,
so I didn't have it for long.
I'm sure there's probably 25 of those items in there that you
more
wanted
than
to
that,
keep,
more than
and
that,
Lee talked you into them.
Yeah. I learned to keep my mouth shut when I got a new find. I wouldn't.
Keep it for a while.
Yeah, that's keep it
anyway.
for a while at
Yeah,
least. Yes.
Yeah, that was Lee. So let's talk about, well, let's talk a little bit about your book. Tell me about putting your book together.
Well, let me tell you how this book began.
Please, please.
Mr. Roberts, co-founder of the Augusta National, called me one day to have lunch, and what he wanted to tell me, he said some of the boys, that members of the Augusta National, realized that his 80th birthday was coming up, and he wanted to plan for his party for his birthday, wanted my input. And I said, well, it's in May, so it'd be nice. So why don't we have it outside and then go inside for dinner or whatever you want to do. And I had an idea, since it was members only, no wives, but that we could show on a screen early days of the Jamboree. That's when the members got together for golf tournament, a few drinks, playing cards, fellowship.
If I can interrupt, the Jamboree was the first tournament of the year at Augusta? No.
Well, it was the first social gathering.
Social gathering.
And it was a tournament as well, because they played a member
Okay.
contest. And so I suggested that we show some of these old photographs, and I had a box of them. So Mr. Roberts said, well, great, Frank, bring them up tomorrow, we'll have dinner and look at these photographs. So I brought a box of the proofs up, and as I handed for him to view, he would say, oh my God, let me tell you about this. And he started telling a story. Each photograph had a story.
Kind of like talking to you. There's
Well,
always
yeah,
a
maybe
story.
so.
Yeah.
So I realized after the evening, I said to Mr. Roberts, I said, Mr. Roberts, these stories are so valuable to the history of this club and to golf in general. Why don't you write a book and include these photographs in them? And he said, very well, if you'll assist me, I'll do that. So that night of his birthday, he announced that he was going to do this book. And for the next year or so, I traveled up to Grandfather Mountain, or wherever he might be, to visit with him and work on the book. But there was one photograph I pulled out and handed to him, and I said, what is this? And what the photograph was the 1937 presentation. The PGA of America held the PGA Seniors event at the Augusta National. You could see in the background the clubhouse. And he looked at it and he says, take this and burn it, and burn the negative. I said, for what? He said, it never happened. No tournament has been played on these grounds except the the Masters.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is crazy, because it happened.
Yeah.
1937, Jock Hutchison won the PGA Seniors, and Alfred Bourne, who was owner of Singer Sewing Machine, donated the trophy. The Bourne Trophy is still given to the PGA Seniors winner. 38, the next year, not Jock Hutchison the first year, Freddie McLeod won it the second year. And they went on to become the official starters for the Masters tournament years going on. And that's another story. But I decided not to burn those negatives and not to burn the photographs. And I had decided that I would do my story of the Augusta National, and I would include that picture. So it's in the book.
Clifford Roberts did the inside story, and you did the outside story of Augusta National.
Right.
Yeah. This book, it's easy reading, it's enjoyable reading, it's great, the great photography. One of the stories that you have told me in the past about your father he never took a color picture because...
Never made a color photograph in his life.
Yeah. And he taught you that one shot was enough if it was the right shot.
That was his signature. And the reason for it being is that film cost so much he couldn't afford it. He had to make sure that one shot was it.
Was the important
shot. And he was
shot.
very good at it, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he was. Yeah, no question about it. So let's talk about some more of the items in the museum.
Sure.
We'll talk about Augusta, because the first annual clock, Augusta National had their invitational, and most people don't know that the first 5 years it was called the Augusta Invitational as opposed to Augusta National Invitational as opposed to the Masters.
Well, what happened was the founding members, were encouraged to do something to help promote the Augusta Invitational, as it was called, I believe.
Yeah.
And Tom Barrett, who later became mayor of Augusta, was a local attorney, and he was one of the founding members. And he was actually the person who found the property. It was a nursery, and it was available, and he contacted Cliff Roberts in New York and said, look, I understand that you and Bob Jones are looking for a suitable place to build a golf course. I think I found it. So Cliff Roberts came down, and he saw it, very enthused about the possibility, and he called Bob in Atlanta. He came down, and the rest is history. I know that Bob walked out through what is now the clubhouse, the home of the Berkmans, and went out and looked over the property and says, this place has just been waiting for a golf course to be laid upon it. And for what little bit of money, remember this was during the Depression, 1930.
34, 33, yeah.
Yeah, they built it in 31 or so, 32. They finished it and had the opening January 13th, 1933. And first tournament, 1934. Yeah, that's, so but anyway, Tom Barrett's idea was to, people used to use these clocks as advertising. And, you know, what was that? Brown shoes, Buster Brown shoes,
Hush Puppies.
whatever.
Yeah.
They would have written on the clock, the face of the clock. And so he had 2 of these clocks done with the to put out to advertise the Augusta Invitational Tournament.
Right.
And this one that I found was in the basement of the Augusta National, and it was needed repairing and in pretty sad shape. But anyway, I had it spruced up. Phil Wall gave it to me. He said, if you like watches and clocks, take it out of here. And so I had it spruced up and repaired, and I had it hanging in my office.
Until Lee got there.
Until Lee saw it, and he said, what is that? And I said, well, it's one of the first things that Tom Barrett had.
It's another thing that you lost. Huh?
Yeah, then it left my office and came out here.
It's out on the wall
Yeah.
here with the trophies. There's no question about it. Yeah, and it fascinates people. People look at that and say, "Well," I said, "Well, the only story I know is it's only one of 2." You know,
Yeah.
I didn't know the truth.
The other one, Jimmy Drew found, it turned up somewhere in Augusta, and he bought it. The other one.
Oh,
And I understand there were only 2 that Tom Barrett made. And recently, I found Tom Barrett's watch, and I bought it. It has his name engraved on the back.
Okay.
But he was the one responsible for the Augusta National being where it is.
And we have, speaking of watches, we have Horton Smith's watch.
Yes, I know.
And Horton Smith was the first winner of the Augusta Invitational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for, I sent a series of photographs out for everyone to have one, which shows the first tee-off of Bob Jones and Walter Hagen teeing off in 1934, the first ones to tee off. So my father made that photograph, and I had copies done for everybody at dinner tomorrow night.
Oh, did
As a
you?
little
Oh,
gift,
yes.
yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. We have the, not the original, but we have a copy of it
Right.
in the museum. We have a lot of black and white copies of both you and your father had shot through the years, you know. So let's jump around a little bit. We talked about Walter Hagen. Tell us about the wonderful Ryder Cup jacket that we have.
Well, a friend of mine, Ken Devine, who is executive director of the PGA in, it is Wisconsin or somewhere. But anyway, he called me and he said, would you be interested in Walter Hagen's Ryder Cup jacket, the first? And I said, yes, how much do you want for it? He told me, and it was a reasonable amount. And so I shared that information with Lee, and he said, well, you don't need it. We need it in the museum. Well, there again,
There's another
it passed
transfer.
through me to
Yeah.
Lee. Lee bought it from Ken Devine.
You know, after this interview and this conversation, we may have to change the name of the museum to the Brandenburg Christian.
No,
Historical Golf Museum.
This was Lee's vision, and I want to say this, John. I've been to golf museums all over the world, including the one at the RNA, the one at, which is now being broken up down in
Changed around.
in
Yeah.
the PGA Tour, created
David.
down in Jacksonville,
Yeah.
St. Augustine. This is perhaps the best I've ever seen, and I tell you why, because you don't have to pay to go in. It's open to the public, whether they belong to the club or they just come out here and are welcome to see it. And it covers everything from the early days of golf to the modern equipment and modern winners. And it's a very comprehensive collection that Lee put together. And I just think it's wonderful what you're doing, and you're sharing all of this with the public and educating people about the history of golf, which is also important.
One of the things that I really love about the museum, spending my whole career in golf also, is that it has not only really important things for golf history, it has the little things. It has the parking passes. It has the little badges. It has the little letters and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not just Walter Hagen's jacket, which is really important. And we have, we have other jackets, Tony Jacklin's jacket. We have the trophies, the major trophies, Those are all fantastic things for the industry and for history. But we also have the little things, the badges and the little scorecards, the old historical scorecards.
And those things, unbelievably, like children love to see these little things, little dolls and little small things. And
the adults
have an interest
become
in it.
children when they see that,
Yeah.
because they remember when they were younger.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I really do like about it. We were talking about the Ryder Cup. I have a picture right here, if someone could hand it to me, of the captains of the Ryder Cups. You said that was very unique. Oh, here you go. Thank you very much. Tell us a little bit about this guy.
Well, I got a call from the PGA. I forget what he is. It doesn't matter. But they said that they were going to, for the first time, gather all of the past captains of the Ryder Cup to come into Dallas for dinner and to tell their stories. They made a film of everyone telling their story about being the captain of the Ryder Cup.
Started to become more popular.
So I was only still photographer there, and I made this one group photograph of them. The only two people who are missing is Ben Hogan and Jack Nicklaus. Jack Nicklaus was on his fishing trip, I think, could not be there. But Ben Hogan had called me and said, "Frank, I understand you're coming out to photograph us." And it turned out that he had a cancer and had to go in for an operation and did not make it for the dinner, which is very sad. So this is I was only photographer there, so this is the only photograph.
Yeah,
of
you
it.
told me that was very unique, so I wanted to mention it. Yeah. But,
And John, it'd be interesting if you could get the PGA to share that film with you. I think you would enjoy it, and maybe have it and show it here at the museum, because each of these captains told their own unique remembrance of being captain and what things that happened, funny, humorous things that happened during that period.
The story behind the story.
The story behind the story.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Thanks very much. That's one thing that I've really have thought about with the museum, is trying to get a little audio visual. I have some slideshows that we do and stuff, but generally, we'd like to get more video. Because one of the things I really had always thought about was the old wide world of golf. Remember Jim McKay and Gene Sarazen. Gene Sarazen used to do those, and it was Arnold Palmer versus Lee Trevino, or whatever. Tommy Bolt versus somebody, and you're always looking to see if Tommy was going to be real fiery. Did you know Tommy very well?
I knew him very well.
Yeah. Was he as
He
fiery?
was a sweetheart. He was a great guy, although his reputation for throwing clubs,
Yeah.
is what most people remember about Tommy, but he was a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Yeah. So let's talk, picking on another golf pro, Tony Jacklin. Tony Jacklin, most people don't know. I mean, they know that he won the Open. They know that he won both the Open and the U.S. Open.
Back to back.
Yeah.
The only person to do that in 100 years. And I met Tony when he played the Augusta National 2 years prior to him winning the Open Championship. And we went out to dinner. My wife is English, and I told him about being married to an English girl. And of course, he had Vivian with him. So he liked Chinese food. And he said, do you know of a Chinese restaurant? And Augusta, of course, has the second largest Chinese population per capita in the United States, only second to San Francisco. And there's a reason for that we can talk about later. But I said, yes, we've got like 42 Chinese restaurants at Augusta. We both love Chinese food. So
42 in Little Augusta.
yeah, little Augusta.
Yeah.
So we went
Which
out
is
and
not
had
little
Chinese
anymore.
food and became friends ever since. That was in the 60s, 67 or so. Yeah.
And at some point, you introduces Lee to Tony, and of course, Lee is not going to let that go. He becomes good friends with him,
Right.
and you guys spent a lot of time together. And Tony had a special hobby that most people don't even know he had, and I didn't even know until we were talking that he actually had this as a youngster and worked on, which was called marquetry. It's a involvement with wood and insert wood stuff.
Right.
We have a number of pictures here, but the one I have that I want to show you, thank you, is this is the Tiger Woods one. You probably had this in your office and lost it to Lee too. But tell us a little bit about Tony and his marquetry.
Well, Tony actually started doing marquetry, paintings, as I call them, using little pieces of wood.
Was he offended when you called it a painting?
No.
Okay.
But he started when he was about 13 years old. And the first one that I saw was really incredible. It was a wood painting of Old Tom Morris and Allen Robertson and another golfer at the Swilken Bridge. And Tony was there to show it at the Augusta National. I forget what year it was, but I just said, this is incredible. So I bought it from Tony. And it's still hanging in my studio. But it was, he told me, he said there were over 400 different pieces of wood needed to complete that painting, and even some mother of pearl, which depicted the stream going underneath the Swilken Bridge at St. Andrews. But he really is incredible. He did a portrait of
Lee.
Of Lee.
Yeah, and actually the portrait that he did, we used as for our logo now with the Brandenburg Historical Golf Museum.
He did one that was really incredible of Bob Jones, and which is really nice. And Bob's grandson, Bob Jones IV, came to see me a year or so ago, and when he saw that piece of marquetry from Tony Jacklin, he said, "Oh, this is incredible, Frank." So I gave it to him, and so he has it now. But
you know, talking to you bring up so many things. Story you told me yesterday, which most people don't know, Bob Jones as opposed to Bobby Jones.
Well, a lot of people don't, Bobby is so, just rolls off the tongue. It's so nice to say
like
Bobby
Frankie
Jones.
or Johnny or whatever.
But he didn't like that. When he was a youngster, he would correct the people announcing him on the first tee, and he said, "My name is Bob Jones, Robert T. Jones Jr." And but people still referred to him as Bobby Jones, although he referred to himself as Bob Jones, or in a formal setting where he would write his name on a business letter, it'd be Robert T. Jones Jr.
Okay.
But most of the time it was signed Bob.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. When you said that, that stuck in my mind because we all know him as a great amateur, Bobby Jones.
Bobby Jones, right?
Yeah. And of course there was the architect, Robert Trent Jones, and he used to go by Bobby Jones.
Yes, he did.
So that's true. Clifford Roberts and he built a golf course, and you worked so closely with Clifford Roberts. I'm sure that you built a friendship up there that most people didn't even know kind of existed, because he seems like such a far distant businessman, just real strict and everything. But you saw a different side of him. As you saw a different side
John,
of
it's
me.
interesting because the two complemented each other, Bob Jones and Cliff Roberts. Bob, I always like to say, was the heart and soul of the Augusta National. And Cliff Roberts was the brain. He was the one that took care of all the minor details. He's the one who raised the money. He was the one who made sure that people were paid, and the growth of the club was primarily his responsibility. to get the money. You remember, as I said, it was created during the Depression, so money was short, and it was very difficult to raise money, but he did it and kept it afloat.
Good. Yeah, and once Arnold Palmer came along and television came along, it started to float pretty far up the hill.
It did. I think that Arnold Palmer was truly responsible, solely responsible for its popularity when television came out, and with his swaggering way, and he captured the imagination of all golf fans. Arnie's Army was created in Augusta.
Yes, we were
and,
saying,
Yeah.
This is a piece from Augusta that I wanted you to kind of explain to me. This is the amateur piece. Tell me a little bit about this
Well,
piece.
this is one they discontinued, and that was left over. And Mr. Roberts gave this to me many years ago, but it was I don't know what they give to the amateurs. I think it's a crystal.
Well, they've actually now brought it back.
Did they?
Yeah, there was a number of years that they stopped, and that's when I think Mr. Roberts gave you this
Yeah.
one, okay? And at some point, I can't tell you exactly when, because in my research, as a curator, I was kind of doing some research with that about a year ago, and all of a sudden I saw it was gone, and then they brought it back. So they're
Great. Same shape, same look.
similar shape.
Similar, okay.
Similar shape, yeah. Not identical, but similar, because as you know, Augusta always recognizes the low amateur
Right.
who finishes, and he's almost, because of Bob Jones,
Right, of
he's
course.
almost as important as the winner. Obviously, he doesn't make as much money, makes no money, but so they've always had that tradition, and so that is another piece that is really special to the our museum. You know.
Well, talking about amateurs, they hold 3 dinners: one for the amateurs, one for the past champions, and one for the international players. And Bob Jones used to always be at the one for the amateurs. That was special to him, and that's where I first met Tiger Woods, when he played as an amateur. The first time he played in the Masters tournament,
98 or so.
and Jack Nicklaus was his hero. And but he was, I forget how old, he's young fella, and I sat and talked with him during the prior to the dinner. They have a cocktail party, and I said, "Do you know who that is?" And he said, "No." I said, "That's Charlie Yates. He's a member, and he won the British Amateur Championship." He said, "Oh, could I get a picture with him?" I said, "Sure." So pointed out some of the great amateurs in the room, and so I took that opportunity to photograph him with some of them.
How did you manage, this is more of a personal question than a history question. How did you manage Lee Brandenburg at the Masters every year?
Impossible.
That's why I asked the question.
There's a story. I mean, he loved, as you know, he loved to sneak into places.
He loved
to
to
do
be
things that
everywhere.
nobody else did.
He was vivacious. He loved to be everywhere.
Yeah. Well, he loved everything about the Masters and being inside and so forth. I'm going to tell a story tomorrow night at dinner about Lee being on television, CBS's telecast of the Masters, and he snuck his way into that. And that's a funny story, but I'll tell that tomorrow night. But yeah, he was.
We might like it on film.
Okay, I'll tell you.
They're not going to hear it. The people tomorrow night aren't going to hear this today.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a character who was close to everyone, and that was Slicker Sam. Sam Rosa.
And I met Slicker Sam in
Yeah,
Chicago.
I know you did, because you were very big in golf in Chicago with
Nat Rosasco.
Nat Rosasco in Northwestern.
Yes.
You worked with him for a long time, and prior to that with the glass company. What is it?
Well, Cobra is it? For me, the last major company was Cobra. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about glass. The
Waterford.
Waterford
Crystal.
Glass Company.
Okay,
I remember you worked with Waterford, represented them all over the world.
Thank you.
But anyway, Slicker Sam was really a sweetheart of a man. Everybody loved him. To know Slicker, you loved him. And whenever they were shooting, the CBS was covering the Western Open in Chicago, Slicker would invite all the cameramen to his restaurant and take them to a nice dinner. So when Sam started coming to the Masters, the cameraman said, "Sam, if you come down to 16 and we'll show you where to stand, we'll get you as the people come through hitting their.
Yeah.
So every year, everybody said, "Oh, there's Slicker Sam." You could see him right behind the golfer. So this one year, we were sitting in the clubhouse waiting the final few groups to come through 16 and make it up to the 18. Then we'd go out and cover them at 18. And all of a sudden, Lee disappeared. We were sitting in the clubhouse watching the telecast. All of a sudden, Lee gets missing. And 5 minutes later, it seems, there he is standing next to Slicker Sam. And he's on television, right?
Yeah.
So we all said, "Hey, in the world did he get down here, get down
Get
to
there so
16 from
fast,
the
yeah.
clubhouse that quick?" Yeah. Well, I said, he knows that we're watching, so when he comes back, pretend we didn't see him, that he wasn't on television. So that got to be a hoot. It was a laugh because he came back and he said, "Oh, I see you watching television. See anything interesting?"
Yeah.
No, it was really good.
He's priming you, he's prodding you.
Yeah. And he said, "Did you see Slicker Sam?" "Oh, yeah, we saw Slicker. He was there at 16 when the leaders were going through."
Oh, that
I
drove
said,
me
"What else
crazy.
did you see?" "No," I said, "Did you see him?" "No," he said, "No, I wasn't here." So finally we relented and said,
Yeah.
"Well, we saw you, you dog. You were down there." But he went down and he told the crowd at 16 that gathered around the tee, he said, "I've got to see Slicker Sam right now." So they let him through and to
Worked his
stand
way-
next to Sam.
worked his
Yeah.
way through, yeah. Well, that's typical Lee. He's going somewhere he doesn't necessarily belong,
Yeah.
About 2 months before Lee, well, not 2 months, maybe 4 months before Lee passed away, we were driving somewhere and there was a trespassing sign, and he wanted us to climb the fence so we could see what's on the other side.
Yeah.
I said, "Lee, you're 87 years old. We're not climbing this fence,"
Yeah.
because he just wanted to be there.
Yeah.
That was the way he was.
Well, I remember one time we were in Newport, Rhode Island, and we'd parked the car, and the four of us,
With
Lee
the
and our
girls,
wives,
yeah.
we go in to look at some of these mansions. And Lee found a gate open to one of these big, beautiful mansions, and he said, "Let's sneak in." I said, "Are you kidding?" No, let's sneak in." So we snuck in. We're walking through the garden. When we looked up at the house, we could see there was a party going on in the back, on the back
On the
porch.
patio, yeah.
And as we were looking through the foliage at what was going on, this lady showed up and said, "Hello, may I help you?" It was the owner of the house. And Lee said, "No, we're just interested to see what was going on." She said, "Well, I'm having a party. Come on and join it."
Oh,
So we ended up, as Lee always does. I'll tell you another story about him sneaking in. Right after the Masters, it used to be the Heritage at Hilton Head.
Yes.
And Lee said, "Frank, let's go down to Hilton Head and go to the Heritage." I said, "Well, I don't have any tickets." And he said, "Well, don't worry, we can go down."
Tickets never stop Lee.
No. So we go down, and he insists on, and he's driving the car, and he says, "Oh, well, where is it being held? Show me." And I showed him the road, and so he goes down, and there's a policeman checking your credentials. And as he gets to the policeman, he turns to me, and, in the passenger side, and just rolls right past him, and the policeman saying, Stop, that." He keeps on going. Now we get to the gate, and there's a policeman, so he does the same thing. He passes him. And as it happened, we go on in, and there's a parking place right in front of the clubhouse. And as we are parking, the fellow working the door is the same man, Bob, who worked the Masters tournament, who I knew for years. And he says, "Hey, Mr. Christian, how you doing?" I said, "Hey, Bob." Lee said, "Do you know him?" I said, "Of course. He works the Masters." "All right, let's tell him that we have tickets. We're waiting on tickets." So as it happened, we go up, and I told him, I hate to lie to him, but I said, "We're waiting for tickets to be delivered." He said, "Oh, go on in. I'm sure they'll
They're coming. Yeah.
So we walked in with no tickets, and we go right on through the clubhouse into the back. The back porch is overlooking the practice putting green. So all of the people, or the players who are practicing, they either knew me or they knew Lee. They come over and speak to us. So it happens a fellow working for the local radio station was doing interviews. So he came over and he said, "Look, who are you two fellas? Everybody seems to know you." And so I said,
Very humbly, I'm sure.
no, I decided I'd lie to him. I said, "Well, I'm nobody, but this fella here's a very famous singer." Now, John, you know how Lee used to love to sing.
Oh, terrible.
He
thing,
knew the
yeah.
lyrics to practically every song that was ever written.
Right.
And
And he made some up along the
oh,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he said, "You're a singer?" He said, "Yes, Lee." So he said, well, look, I'm going to break, and then when I come back, I'd like to interview you, and maybe you'd sing a song. Well, of course, that was matter for Lee, just sing a song.
Yeah.
So sure enough, after the break, he came over. He says, we're talking to a famous singer from California, Mr. Lee Brandenburg. And Lee, would you like to sing a song for us? So Lee punched me, and we both sang a song that Slicker Sam made up. It was a funny little ditty. And anyway, that was heaven for Lee to be able
Oh, yeah. An audience of one was enough for Lee.
Oh, absolutely.
He could handle 100, but an audience of one was plenty.
Well, Lee used to play. I invited him to come over. Tony Jackman host an international par 3 contest in
I was gonna
in
ask you
England, in
about that,
Birmingham,
yeah.
which is actually older than the Masters tournament. And so I got Lee invited to it.
Farmhouse or farmhouse?
Well, they are the sponsors. Farmhouse Frozen Foods, and so Lee comes over and he's playing, and at the 18th hole, there's a grandstand with maybe 150, 200 people in, and as Lee finishes, he takes a bow and everybody starts applauding, and Lee then walks up to the grandstand and starts singing a song and asking everybody to join in. It was hilarious, and of course, they loved him. So the next year, they named the bridge over one of the water holes.
Yeah.
It's the Brandenburg Bridge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was a real charmer.
He was loved everywhere he went.
Yeah, and when he used to talk about, and he's still on my shoulder telling me about it, talk about the museum, you could just see him light up.
Oh.
Yeah. So in the museum days, you and Lee, talked every day or twice a day, 3 times a day?
Over the 30-something years that after we first met, we talked at least 2 or 3 times a week, yes.
Yeah.
And we traveled together, and we did things together, and we collected together. His taste and stuff, and we talked about what should be in a museum, and we agreed on that it should be an education for people looking at the things to show the early days of golf and what it meant and how the equipment progressed up to the modern days in the golf ball, the history of the golf ball, history of the tee, and some of the outstanding moments in golf. And it's all here in this museum.
And it is. There's no question about it. Especially, since Lee's passed away, we haven't added a lot. This is Lee's legacy. I don't want to change Lee's legacy. Modern golf is completely different anyway, but the history is so important, and the people you have dealt with was so important.
No.
But tell me about the early days when this golf course was built in 1998, and that's when the museum, quote unquote, opened, because it was built then. But up to then, you guys collected together passionately. How much input did you put in initially for the museum? How much did you get to sit and talk with him, what you should do, what you shouldn't do?
Yes, John, we did constantly. We talked about what was important, what was not. For instance, a feathery golf ball came up for sale in Australia, and Mr. Davis, who was a curator of the Golf Hall of Fame, called me and said, Frank, this is a very important feathery. And it belonged to Sandy Hurd.
Sandy Hurd, yes.
And his nephew in Australia ended up with it, and he wanted to sell it. And so I told Lee about it, and Lee said, well, gee, let's get it, because we wanted it in the United States. And Lee wanted it in the museum, so Lee ended up buying it, and he has it today.
We do. We do have it today. We don't have it in the museum, one, because it's so valuable to history. We want to pass it along to history, as we do with all the valuable things here. We like them here, and we'll keep them here as long as we can, and then we want to make sure that they don't get lost for history. And the feathery is one of the balls, is one of the things that we feel is really important to golf history. And I knew that Sandy Hurd had it. I didn't know the story of how you were intervened with that, okay? And there's, like I said, 70% of the items you had your fingers on, if not more,
Well, I was close to Mr. Davis. He was the curator when the Hall of Fame was in Pinehurst, and I served on the board during those years.
Okay.
So when the museum started going downhill at Pinehurst, we decided to give, because the tour was getting ready to open the
St.
museum
Augustine.
down in St. Augustine, so we gave them some of the memorabilia, helped them to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ray Davis was a really incredible person. His knowledge of golf and golf memorabilia was unbelievable.
Your knowledge
So he
of
helped.
golf- your
he helped
knowledge of golf is pretty-
both of us, Lee
pretty
and
good,
myself,
yeah.
to get some valuable things.
Yeah. Well, we just love to hear your knowledge of golf. I mean, it's as good as anybody around for sure. So I compliment you on that. One of the things we haven't talked about is the two portraits we have up there, the paintings that you, I think either had done for Lee or you had them and sold them to Lee or gave them to Lee, whatever.
Yeah, it's an Augusta artist. His last name was Maypole, and he was really a nice artist. And I'd seen these things that he had painted, from the Reed portrait of Old Tom and then the portrait of Alistair McKenzie, two very large portraits. And he was painting them to sell, and I let Lee know that they were for sale. So he came to Augusta and met Mr. Maypole and bought them and brought them, had them shipped out here.
Yeah,
But
yeah, they really add to our trophy area, the trophy room. I'm in the process of renaming it the Lee Brandenburg Trophy Room.
Oh,
It's referred to as the trophy room, but we want to put his name on it.
Well, this is one of the only golf museums that I know of that has all of the significant trophies. You've got trophies from all of the major championships, plus the Ryder Cup, plus the British Amateur Champion, and the
American Amateur.
so it's great.
Yeah, that's the first thing that people notice. We get people that are playing golf and they're walking through and they'll look at the trophies because they're so much larger. They're full-size trophies as opposed to replicas, and so that'll attract them. And then they start, if they have enough time, meandering through the museum and say, "Oh my goodness, what's this and what's that?" And as I said, 10 years ago, I became curator. Lee and I were having lunch, and he said, he was one of the few people that called me Johnny. And he said, "Johnny," he said, "you're retired now and you know golf, so I'm making you curator." And there was no discussion, do you want to be or whatever. I just was made curator, okay? And
Well, I think that's a fortunate thing for both Lee and the museum, because we all knew that you had a rich history in the game of golf and many different aspects, and so you were just absolutely perfect for being the curator of this museum and bringing it forward.
Yeah, I appreciate the nice words. I do the best I can with the legacy of keeping Lee's legacy going.
It's important.
Yeah, he was such a great individual. A little bit off the wall at times, but as we experienced, but you had to love him for it, I told him one time, I said, "Lee, you come up with 50 ideas a month. 48 of them are just crappy, but 2 of them are really good."
Yeah.
And he said, "Johnny," he said, "tell me how you really feel." But that was Lee. So,
Yeah.
and I think of him, every day I'm here, and I listen to him as he's on my shoulder. And I look at all these fine things that you guys put together and just compliment you to no end, My history and talking with you just gets me more excited. But I really appreciate all the time that you put in with us today. I appreciate that tomorrow we're going to have a little dinner and tell a few more stories along the way. Mostly listen to your stories. I don't need to tell many stories, but and so I have a special little gift for you that we're now producing. Can you give me the white cap, guys, please? We have developed a society for the Brandenburg Historical Golf Museum. And we have our own cap, and you're the 3rd member of the society. So I want to say congratulations. It's a very small group, but we're honored to have you there. And you can always remember it by this way. And you can always think of your friend, and we'll think of you a lot of times.
Lee.
That's Lee. That's a marquetry logo that Tony Jacklin did, and then we put it with the Brandenburg logo. So.
Well, John, you may carry Lee on your shoulder, but I still carry him in my heart. I miss him
Perfect.
every day.
Yeah, he's in my
And
heart.
this is a wonderful gift, and I
I
appreciate
can't
it.
tell you
Thank
how,
you so
how
much.
much I've enjoyed this today.
I enjoyed it so much.
Take care.
Thank you.